Good morning and welcome to this overview of the three assignments that will be covered in this subject, GEO203, Global Resource Consumption and Security, a geography subject in the Bachelor of Education program. In the first assignment, you're asked to do data review and critical reflection on the data on areas that relate to energy in our world. This subject begins by seeking to identify significant trends and patterns in some data-rich articles that examine and explain the significance of patterns and trends relating to energy consumption and energy use. And in the first assignment, you're asked to read the articles on energy in the Our World in Data website and to identify one or two or more trends or patterns in the articles that impress you, that you see as important, that you see as being important to teach and cover in your classroom. And you're asked to explain, analyse and critically reflect on these. So let's go now to the Our World in Data website. And under the resources for energy, you'll see a discussion of the importance of energy and its role in our world. And in the other readings, you'll see further insights on this. And if you look at the energy use and consumption, you'll see that the data shows quite a dramatic increase over the last 200 years in the consumption and use of energy, and thus the production of pollution and difficult side products that need to be addressed. And you're asked to go to some of these articles and then to look at the ways in which an understanding of the data in these articles can help inform us to make sound decisions. So you might go to this article on production and consumption of energy by Ritchie, Rosado and Rosa. And then if you click on Cite this article, you can see the citation reference that you can place in your resource. And then as you read through, you'll see some information on the ways in which the amount of energy that's being used has increased and the ways in which this increase has brought challenges and how these challenges can be addressed. You'll see that since the 1800s, with the use of coal in driving the Industrial Revolution and steam trains, there has been quite an increase in energy consumption. And then with the development of the internal combustion engine in 1900 through to the present time, there has been use of oil and gas and other fuels to power our vehicles and trucks and airplanes, which has led to quite an increase. At the same time, with health developments, population growth has increased from less than 1 billion people before 1800 to over 5, 6, 7 or more billion people in the world today. And so with increased use of energy and increased population, there has been a huge consumption of energy that's taken millions of years to be stored as coal and gas and oil. And there's also been a huge production of pollutants such as carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide and methane, which has brought about the rise in the world's temperatures by 1 to 1.5 degrees or more. And so this brings many challenges, which has led to a move towards renewables such as solar, wind, hydropower, and others. And so these are the sort of issues that you'll look at and examine in this first assignment. But you'll also look at the way in which evidence and also data can help guide our understanding and our decisions, and also the way in which renewables can help to alleviate some of the challenges if we got enough of them before the temperatures rise and cause huge troubles and difficulties. So one of the suggestions I make for this assignment is to include an initial discussion of what is data and why is it important in geography and other sciences. Data in geography refers to the facts, the figures, the information, the graphs, the details that help us to understand the patterns and trends that are taking place. And so if you examine the nature and use of data, I think this would be a great starting point for this assignment. Data is important for helping us understand the world around us and the changes that are taking place, such as deforestation and removal of the trees, ocean currents and ocean pollution, urban growth and increased population growth in the size of our cities. Data is important for helping us understand the way in which resources such as water, energy and food are used and the ways in which this food use changes over time. Data can help us predict what will happen in the future, help us to identify problems and to solve problems. It can help us in planning and help us to predict and understand disasters and climate change and how these challenges can be best addressed. Data can help us understand the use of energy and where it comes from and how it's used in different ways in different countries and different places. And it can help us understand energy transitions that are taking place and that could take place and the benefits that this would bring. Data can help us to understand water availability, consumption, and pollution to water, the cycles of droughts and floods, and also the way in which water is used for irrigation, for farming, and also for urban water supplies. Data can also help us understand the use of food, the production of food, the consumption of food, and the way in which transport moves food around the globe. So how is this data gathered and collected? There's a number of means that you might want to look into. And there are times when this data might be misused or manipulated or misinterpreted. I think it'd be good to reflect on that as well. And so in conclusion, you draw together this discussion on data and its use and occasional misuse in order to discuss the ways in which data can help us understand and manage resources such as energy, food, water, and other resources. So after looking at data, we then suggest that you focus on some of the benefits of being able to use energy in order to transport goods, in order to move beyond coal and steam-powered energy in the Industrial Revolution to more advanced use of energy to do an amazing range of things today, which help with human flourishing and help us to do well and have lots and lots of resources so that we can live well. At the same time, this massive use and increased use of energy also brings problems, and I would suggest that in this first assignment, you also address some of the problems and pollution challenges and problems with overconsumption. And you could also look at the way in which use of energy is not evenly distributed, but some people in rich countries and rich areas flourish more, and others in poorer countries and poorer areas don't have access to the technologies or energies that others have. And so I would encourage you to look briefly at these matters and then draw together in your conclusion some of the ways in which insights from data can help us understand the use of energy in our world and ways in which it can be better used. And a well-developed conclusion will draw together all of the findings throughout the research in your essay. I suggest that about 10 to 12 scholarly resources that you could draw from Google Scholar or also from the college library will be very useful in this assignment, which will conclude with a reference list to these scholarly resources. I suggest 2 or 3 scholarly resources in a paragraph is very useful, and more than 10 or 12 overall can make often for a better assignment. But remember, it's not just citing the resources that's important, it's engaging with the ideas that's in the resources, thinking through their implications, and developing your own original insights. It's not enough to just collect information and data. You then need to edit and work through your insights and your findings. You need to construct a well-developed assignment with an introduction, middle, and conclusion that develops a central argument and presents this well. And then you need to draw this together in the conclusion at the end of your assignment. In your second assignment, you're asked to develop a longer essay of 2,000 words or a bit more, in which you will apply the concept of a nexus or connection between water, energy, and food. And so you could go to the resources that we cover each week. You could also go to the college library and Google Scholar and collect information on the interrelationship between water, energy, and food, their connection, and the way in which resource use and management can be helpful in seeking to better use these resources. Remember, in your answer, you're asked to locate and briefly describe an area to be studied, which could be the local area that you live in or the local area that your school and students would be interested in. And you're asked to look at whether the better understanding of the use of water, energy, and food in this local area could lead to better management. You could also look more widely at a broader area, including your state or the whole of the country, and the ways in which water, energy, and food are there. And you could look at specific examples in your local area in which water, energy, and food are used and managed well, and the ways in which there is an interdependent relationship between their use and the ways in which they're managed. You should assess the potential impact of change on their use and climate change as we produce carbon dioxide, temperatures rise. What will this mean for the local area that you're considered? Carefully read through this question and think of the ways in which you can structure your answer in order to examine water, energy, and food and their relationship and contribution to flourishing and life in the local areas in which you and your students live and work. Water, energy, and food are all important for us to flourish and live well, and often we don't see many of the ways in which this is managed by our local councils and local government responsibilities. And if we look a bit closer at these and their relationship, we'll see that our local governments and local councils are doing a lot to gather the water and store it in dams and manage the flow of water, to gather the energy and distribute it from power stations to all of the people in need, and to also gather food that's grown in certain farming areas and move it around and distribute it. All of these are important for leading to a sustainable, healthy environment that we can all enjoy, and developing a resilient environmental setting so that when changes and floods and climate change occur, the food and the water and the energy will continue to be provided, and that the economy will grow in ways that we can all flourish and do well, but avoiding excessive exploitation of some resources that won't lead to a healthy environment for the future, and also ensuring social justice and fair distribution of water, energy, and food to all people in our region and also around the country and also in overseas regions. Often data is gathered for studying water, energy and food and other resources by satellites, by mapping, by surveys, by case studies, by interviews, by analysing government policies and by modelling. And often these studies are used to better understand change in population, change in resource use, waste, pollution and inefficiency, and climate change. And you might want to consider some of these matters and the ways in which they impact your local area in this study, and consider ways in which your students might be interested in these changes and developments. How could you encourage the students to research these developments? You might want to look at specific developments such as droughts. How often do they occur? How do they influence us? And what does this mean for desalination and other ways of gathering water and for dams? You might want to look at biofuel production, or look at water storage or power distribution. You might want to look at the ways in which local governments and other governments are able to manage these resources, to develop policies, and the ways in which students can provide some insights and answers that will be useful. So again, I encourage you to read through assignment 2 carefully, to plan ample amount of time to do your research into each of these areas, such as a study of the ways in which water, energy and food are being used and the way in which they relate to one another in your local area. And you might want to choose 1 or 2 or 3 specific focus areas and examples to look at. And you might want to add an appendix to show in which the ways in which the students could study and generate interest in these areas as you teach a class on this. And remember, these areas relate to many subjects and topics that you could be teaching in lots of other subjects in the classes and schools that you're teaching. Your third assignment asks you to examine an area or 2 or 3 or 4 areas in greater depth, and to examine the circular economy in these areas. So you need to begin by understanding circular economy and going to Google Scholar and to your college library to get information on what a circular economy is, and interacting with scholars who've written about the ways in which natural systems follow a circle, and so water evaporates, goes up into the sky, forms clouds, travels, hits mountain ranges, comes down. In our rivers, we have very fresh water that we can then use for our plants and animals and ourselves. So there is a water cycle, and there's also a carbon cycle, a nitrogen cycle, and other natural resource cycles. And some cycles take millions of years, like the production of coal, oil and gas. And so we need to think about these very slow cycles. What happens if we use these resources more quickly? Even minerals like copper and aluminium take millions of years to gather and to form. What happens if we use all of these very rapidly and then deplete the resources without developing a cycle? In this third assignment, you can look at the ways in which we have developed some cyclical processes to maintain and preserve some of these resources, like gathering of aluminium cans and aluminium products, so we don't lose the aluminium once we've used it. Once we can reuse it and reuse it again. The same with iron that can be reused again, steel that can be reused again, glass can be reused again. So there are ways to develop circular economies, and you may be particularly interested in some of the circular economies in your local areas. I think it's fascinating to look at opportunity shops and the way in which clothing's not wasted, the way in which it's reused. And opportunity shops will sometimes say that 70% of their income comes from clothing being reused in lots of different ways, and then some of it will be bagged up and sold on or sent overseas to poorer nations. There's lots of ways in which the circular economy helps us get a lot more value out of the resources that are around us. With food, we have Harvest and other food companies that are able to not-for-profit recycle and preserve food so there is less waste, and then there is some of the materials go back into the farms and they're able to be used in various ways. There's circular economies all around us that you're asked to study for this third assignment, and you can focus on one particular way in which a circular economy is recycling materials, or you could look at 2 or 3 or more examples, and you could go to Google Scholar in your college library and gather 10, 12, 15 or more resources that talk about this use, and you could think about the ways in which you could make this more interesting for your students. Circular economies mimic natural ecosystems, and they reuse materials and reduce waste, and thus they develop recycling of materials and resources that reduces the loss of material and enables flourishing through the reuse of materials. There's a lot of benefits that come from these circular economies, such as reducing the environmental impact, improving resource efficiency, creating jobs, and enhancing flourishing and sustainability. You could look at particular companies like IKEA or others that recycle the materials they use. You could look at other examples that you could find, and you could even encourage students or yourself to interview some of the people who work in the circular economies, and this could be written up as part of your assignment. Think about the ways in which these circular economies replicate the natural world and natural efficiencies by forming closed-loop systems that reduce the loss of energy and resources. Think of the ways in which value can be added to resources through circular economies and the way in which leakages might be reduced. So the circular economy could be explored through looking at water management, looking at the needs of the natural world. That you could look at construction and design of homes. You could look at energy and solar or wind or tidal. You could look at composting and nutrient recycling and farming. You could look at designing more repairable products. You could look at materials and furnishings and food scraps, ways in which they could be reused. And again, you could think about the ways in which students could develop projects and work in teams in order to develop some ideas and resources that would be useful in the circular economy. So wish you well in these 3 assignments. And I encourage you to think more deeply about the ways in which you can apply the insights from these assignments in the classroom, and you can stimulate interest in these areas from your students through particular activities that you might use. I encourage you to read the question for each assignment carefully, to do background reading for each of the weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 in order to understand some key concepts that are being covered in this subject. Take some notes on this material, put in your 5 to 10 hours a week on each of these weekly topics that are covered, and then apply these insights in your assignments. I encourage you to then take 10 or 12 scholarly resources from Google Scholar from this subject and from your college library and apply and use them in these assignments. And to, where you can, use 2 or 3 or more resources in a paragraph so that you go beyond just summarizing to engaging with the ideas, thinking more deeply about the ideas and working through these concepts in your assignments. I encourage you then to spend some time editing and structuring your assignment and developing a single argument and theme throughout the essay, and then draw it together in the conclusion. I encourage you to mostly write in the third person, objectively saying this is what scholars say, this is what the evidence points to. But on occasion, you might have a paragraph or so in which you'll write in the first person and say, I'm interested in this because I have seen and observed, realizing that the subjective is often less powerful in that it includes some of your own opinions and it's harder to build evidence from, but it's also important because you own the value and importance of these insights. I encourage you to also include some reflections on Christian perspectives and other student cultural perspectives if people come from other religious groups or cultural groups, and to also reflect on resources that would make this a more interesting class. If you have any questions on any of these assignments, I encourage you to get in touch. If you'd like to show me or your teacher a draft, I encourage you to do that, and we'd be only too happy to help and advise where we can in answering your questions and also guiding you to do well in this subject. Remembering, this is not just some scholarly study. This is a way of better understanding our world, our place in it, and growing in our understanding in order that we might have increased opportunities and flourish. I look forward to keeping in touch, both in this subject and other subjects that we might work with. Thank you.